Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Steve Bachelor. I'm one of the housekeepers in the Museum of Care, and I want to thank you for joining this reading group. I'm not really sure what it will be like because it's going to be made by us, so whatever we want it to be is what it will become. So I look forward to your participation and your thoughts and contributions. It I don't anticipate doing all the talking, so I hope that you brought ideas and thoughts with you. I thought that we could start by going around and introducing ourselves and perhaps giving a sense of explaining what brought you here. Um, I will go ahead and start, and then I'll pass off to, I'll just go to whoever happens to be next to me in the box. Uh, so again, my name is Steve Bachelor. I've been with the Museum of Care since its beginning. Those of you, you may already know, the Museum of Care was an idea that David Graeber had not long before his untimely passing. And it was an idea that he had, that museums, instead of being dedicated to protecting monuments, that they should really be dedicated to enshrining and celebrating what we value in each other's humanity. And the same sort of care that should be given to monuments should be given to the things that we value most, which are social relationships. So the Museum of Care has no actual existing brick and mortar kind of facility. It instead is a collection that moves with the people who happen to come together to to talk and facilitate conversations rooted in care and understanding. I've done a couple reading groups for the Museum of Care. This is my first on bullshit jobs. I did one on debt, and some of you may have attended that one or perhaps heard of it. It was a lot of fun, and so I had an opportunity to do one on this book, and am excited to do it. So that's a little. Let's see. Any other background on me? Oh, I'm in the United States. I'm in the Boston area, and I've been a reader of David Graeber's work since the late 1990s. He and I crossed paths many years ago at a university in the United States. And though I wouldn't say that I knew him well, I've come to really appreciate his work. And it continues to be a real wellspring of ideas for me. So let me pass off to the person on the screen who's to my immediate right, which is Michael.
Um, Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm in London. I work at SOAS in a university, and I have read this book before, but I'm rereading it. I don't think I've read the end of it, actually. So I'm excited to have another reading group and just chit chat. And how about Gerald?
I am Gerald, also in the Boston area, and found this book on oh, can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. Found this book on a bookshelf in Vermont one time, and it was this I studied economics, and this realization that so much of the jobs, in the world are somewhat arbitrarily, it seems, I before I would talk about this kind of bullshit jobs phenomenon with friends, how many jobs were kind of arbitrarily assigned. Sometimes they were considered jobs, and then other times it was considered part of life. The same functions were sort of arbitrarily picked. So I've just been a fan of this. I found the book a little bit lacking in sort of actual economic language. It was a fun read, but it you know, left a lot, I think, of opportunity to kind of get into the weeds about the intricacies of the language behind economics. So yeah, this is the first reading group. I've been a part of this group, or similar groups, but this is the first one that kind of jumps into this book, and this book is really the one that brought me to David Graeber the most, because it was kind of the one I found on the shelf that spoke to me and my interests the most. So Quinn Costello, you're up.
Hi, I assume folks can hear me. My name is Quinn. I'm zooming in right now from Savannah, Georgia in the United States, but I'm from Oakland, California. I first came to this book through an interview with David Graeber, and I just remember thinking like, oh, this is a thing that I've always been kind of conscious of and never really aware of. And it just kind of like, the more I heard him talking and reading the book, realizing like, oh my God, this is like everywhere all around me. I've always felt this, but I've never actually heard anybody put words to it, and especially words that were so freaking hilarious, and made the whole kind of thing so kind of comical, in a way that I thought was really, really amazing. So anyway, I'm also a filmmaker and really inspired by his work and his ideas, and my work and stuff. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to this reading group. And I don't know who is to my right on the screen, so I'll call out maybe to Patricia.
Hey, I live in Oakland. Hi, I'm also part of another a group on Basgard. And my name is Patricia. You can say Patricia if it's okay. And I live in Oakland. And let's see, I've read a couple of David's works. Let's see. And the one piece that I'm interested in is alienation, and this whole thing about this like discarding people as potential to do anything else but labor, that whole idea that we can think of ways to create a workforce that is or a working environment that is not around the capitalist perspective. This book, I read a couple of critiques on it, but also I've jumped around in this reading, and I'm just looking forward to like really learning from everyone else and contributing somewhat from my organizing background in labor. Thank you. And I will pass it on to, oh, Nika is here. Hi, can I pass it on to you?
Hi. Hi. Thank you, Stephen, first of all, for doing this work. Once again, really appreciate that. So I'm Nika, I'm David's widow, and I'm one of the founders of Museum of Care. And I'm really looking forward to this reading group. For me, this book is very valuable also because it's quite innovative in this format. In a way, it's collaborative writings, because David was using testimonies of the people who writing to him about the actual metaphysical violence that happens to them, and also because it's written with so much compassion to the people that generally criticize and considered to be even an enemy. So it's not a class struggle book in a way. And I'm looking forward to develop this reading group also in a more innovative format. We talked with Stephen about that, but probably it will be really great if we all consider to propose something. Should we make it more like roundtables, invite some people to contribute? Should we come up with different formats as well? So it will be a very collaborative. But also, I'm looking forward to Steven's possibility to summarize and to facilitate and to lead the long reading groups. That is a long book. And I'm passing to Emma.
Hello, everyone. You hear me? Yeah, so I'm in France. I'm Czech American. My mom's Czech, my father's American. And I actually interviewed Nika for my podcast called Artists on the Verge, which is about artists. And since then, I've been obsessing over Another Art World, the series of 3 essays. I read Bullshit Jobs over the summer, and I actually found it weirdly enough, even though you would think it's the opposite of what anything that artists face, because they kind of face the opposite. It was very interesting to me because it explains a lot of this idea of unemployment around artists that I think a lot of artists face. And he even addresses that directly in the book. This idea that something paid is not supposed to be fulfilling or fun. And then a fun fact actually is that during our interview with Nika just offhandedly said she thinks Bullshit Jobs would make a good opera. 2 different people independently of each other got in touch with me, a composer and a director, both excited about this idea. It's very hard to fund an opera, so no promises, but I'm just saying it was something that struck a chord. So yeah, so I'll pass it on to, I don't know, Gomila.
Thanks so much, Emma. So my name is Camilla. I'm based right now in Toronto, Canada, and I'm originally from Uzbekistan in Central Asia. This book was recommended to me by a friend. We often recommend books to each other, and then we go out for lunch and discuss it. And I think between the time she recommended and I actually read it was a few months, and so I was so excited. I was like, Mira, this book that I'm reading now, it's so this and this. And then she says, you don't remember that I was actually the one who recommended it to you. So it was hilarious. There were a few things that really resonated for me with this book. I think it finally, similar to how some other speakers said, it finally put into words what I've been thinking about for a very long time. Ever since I started working a couple decades ago, I couldn't understand why our life has to revolve around work and around 9 to 5. Basically, why are we spending the best years of our life and the best time of the day doing work for someone else, or for various reasons, to have money to survive, etc. But why is our universe set up like that, and why can't we do it in a different way? And then this idea and theory, I think, developed by someone else, that if the value or the income was distributed equally among everyone, that we would only all need to work just part-time. That would be enough. We don't all need to be working full-time. Then the other thing that I think, growing up in a doctor's family back in Uzbekistan, it's a very low-paid job, despite the importance of this care work. So my dad is an anesthesiologist, my mom is a physiotherapist. And, on a daily basis, they would save lives and just do very important things. But we had a very poor childhood, so to say. Some very, very old cars and no flush toilet and all that fun stuff. So I couldn't understand why someone who was doing such an important job and working long hours was valued so little by the society. So I think that also kind of is covered in the book. So I'm looking forward to the discussions, and I think a lot of it is relatable to me. I'll pass it over to Michael Workman.
Thanks, Camilla. I'm Michael Workman. I'm based in San Francisco, California. And I think I first came across David's work when I was going to undergrad at the University of Montana. I was just going through the library and I saw Utopia of Rules, and I liked the design of it and judged the book by the cover, and then read it and loved it and found it really profound, and just was deeply engaged with his work in general, because it was mixed like humor with like really serious analysis, but like never losing hope in humanity or faith in like different ways of imagining how the world could be structured. And so yeah, his work hit me at like a time and was deeply influential to me and still is. And I read Bullshit Jobs when it came out. And so I'm really excited to go back through it. Found out about this through my friend Quinn, who's in Savannah right now, but is based in Oakland, who's a friend and filmmaking collaborator with me. So I'm really excited to be here and revisit this work with everybody. How about Barbara?
So I'm Barbara. I'm based in Berlin, actually near Berlin. I work at Macromedia University and in a school. I'm interested, being based in Germany, I'm interested in the bureaucracy and inefficiencies because here it's very much everything so bureaucratic, it's so inefficient, which is totally crazy. And I'm also interested in the psychological impacts on the workers. I've done a few very bad paid jobs in my life, so that's it. I'm passing on. Monica.
Hello, I'm in Colorado in the US, and I feel like I pretty much tried to read everything I could get my hands on by David, mostly resonating because of the idea of looking for conditions where we could all be free. Is there anyone left? I missed the first part, so I don't know. Someone else, please take it over.
Christian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christian. I'm in Basel, Switzerland, and I've also an background in economics. I came across David's work first when Debt, the First 5,000 Years, was released, and I read that a couple of years after I was done with my studies, and these had left me profoundly dissatisfied because they obviously described things that didn't exist. And a short while later, we had the economic crisis in 2008, which again showed that what you learn in basic economics is just a load of horse shit. And so I kind of stuck with the people who were offering alternatives, which through various ways kind of brought me in contact with the Museum of Care. I was also in Steve's that group. That was very cool. And for some reason, I ended up right now running another debt group, reading group here, which is on Michael Hudson's history of debt in ancient Greece and Rome. So in case somebody wants to do history from a different point of view, that's also on. Okay, so that's me. And I'm not sure, do we have somebody else? I think it's everybody, right? I wasn't here at first too. Who's missing then?
Few more.
Raise your hand. Oh, okay, Caroline. Sorry about that. I wasn't here at the beginning.
Right, no, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm a bit of an imposter and intruder. This is the first discussion group of yours that I've come to, and I only heard of David Graeber just a few months ago from a Hungarian artist friend of mine based in London. I live in Wales. I'm a writer, artist, and filmmaker. I love Ken Loach films, for example. I'm also a member of our local Extinction Rebellion group here in Cardigan. So I'm very interested in community actions and protests and what we can do as people to overturn overweening governments and unfairness generally, but I'm probably extremely naive. I haven't actually read Bullshit Jobs. I have been reading The Dawn of Everything, which has just been blowing my mind. I love it so much, and I hope to read everything by David Graeber that I can. I'm so sorry he's gone. That's really all I've got to contribute, but thank you for being here, basically. That's it. Okay. I might have to leave early anyway too, so thanks.
If you pick someone else.
Yes. Who have we had? Monica Hardy? Have we had Tobias?
No. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Tobias. I'm based in
Minnesota. And I first heard about David Graeber because my mom is an anthropologist, and um, she had a very difficult experience navigating the bureaucracy of academia. And so her Graeber's work was in many ways, really profoundly impacted the way that she was able to kind of relate to or understand her experience. And so that's how I was introduced to his work. And I just find it incredibly helpful now that I'm an adult in the world and experiencing the bullshit that goes in. That's a part of everyday life, of work, of how people with a little bit more power than you are able to kind of leverage that in really sadistic and unfair ways. I found David's work to be incredibly helpful tool for understanding our society. So thank you.
Carol is the last person.
What about Emma and Camila?
I already went.
Oh, okay.
Carol.
Me too.
Oh, sorry. I was finishing the last paragraph in this chapter. So I was like, oh no. Sorry.
It's okay. I think it's me, right? Hi everyone. Thank you for creating this group, this opportunity. I don't know what was the question to answer because I arrived quite late. But I think I met David Graeber for the first time in 2016. But I haven't read anything until the dawn of everything, because I was looking for something different than, I don't know, Jared Diamond, Harari, this kind of books about human evolution. And then I started to know about the Museum of Care. I was working about actually kind of creating a kind of a Museum of Care here in Portugal, where I live. So yes, I'm very happy and excited to be part of this group. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We've got a really nice group here from a variety of backgrounds, so I'm looking forward to this. I usually start by providing a brief overview. This might be material that you're already aware of, so I apologize. But the book itself began as a long article that he wrote, that David Graeber wrote, and it went viral because he really into something that that a lot of people felt and hadn't really had the opportunity to express. And when he gave voice to this, it spread very quickly. Within a matter of months, the article was translated into at least a dozen languages, and then he had the opportunity to turn it into a book. And he wrote it in a very interesting way because he was able to set up an email account where he had people who had bullshit jobs write to him. And so it's an ethnography, but an ethnography that began from a collaborative point of view where David was able to be a participant observer with in a way, co-authors as they described their experience with having bullshit jobs. One of the main points that I thought we could start with is how the book is not an economic. It's about economics, but it's not a traditional economic kind of work. It's a psychological work more than anything else that studies the social and political effects of a system that in essence is dehumanizing. And so he spends a lot of time talking about the spiritual violence that is inflicted upon people as they do this type of work. the first chapter, which is what we can discuss today, has to do with defining bullshit jobs and giving a sense of, what exactly is a bullshit job versus what isn't a bullshit job. And he spends a great deal of time reaching what is his final working conclusion, which is a bullshit job is a form of paid employment that is so completely pointless, unnecessary, or pernicious that even the employee cannot justify its existence, even though, as a part of the conditions of employment, the employee feels obliged that this is not the case. So this definition from the start is inherently subjective, which some might consider to be an empirical flaw in the study, but that as an ethnography is actually one of its strengths. Because if the person doing the job themselves consider the job bullshit, then is it not then bullshit? He asks that as a question, and the answer is fairly obvious, I think, that if the people who know the job best and who are doing it consider the job bullshit, then it by definition is. Of course, he qualifies it by saying there may be some instances in which someone is doing work that connects to some larger process of which they aren't familiar, but the evidence that he uses shows that these are people who are quite aware of the work that they're doing, where it fits in a larger structure, and that the work is indeed bullshit. So I thought we could start by just asking people if they've ever had, since this is meant to be collaborative, if any of you have had a bullshit job, and if so, what was it like, and what did you experience what Graeber calls spiritual violence in the process of doing it? Christian?
Yeah,
Did I see your
I
hand
think
go up?
I had several, I think, to be honest. Okay, so the first one I was working for a major German auto worker. That was while I was still in university. I ended up in a foreign country in the Department of Organization, and I was assigned to check out the status of all the small and medium-sized projects in IT in the company, which is just, look, they had like 150 projects that had been done over the last year, and they weren't quite sure if they had all been, fulfilled. Of course, the money had already been spent in all these projects. So I sat around there and I talked to 150 different people about their projects, and actually found out that the significant part weren't done, hadn't begun, but it was all like budgeted and spent and everything. So I think that looked like something important. I spent about 10 months there. By the end, nobody had looked at my results. I put them in a drawer and left. I kind of came to that realization a couple of months before I ended. So I had this routine. I would walk through the production plant and had certain stops. There's the machine where you get the M&Ms, and then you go over there and talk to the nice girl, and then walk over there and, take a break outside, get a bit of sun, come back in. And then if you time this right, you have about 2 hours on your way, and then it all looks like you've been doing something because you were in this department and that department and that department. So that was number one. And afterwards, I had the opportunity to look into some consulting gigs. And my God, that was probably the most unnecessary stuff I've ever seen in my life. Because these people were hired to talk about stuff that nobody was interested in, but felt like we should have a paper that would then disappear in a drawer, which is actually quite frequent in that business, unless you get hired to fire people because the management doesn't want to do it. And I've been working now for about, I don't know, 25, somewhere between 25 and 30 years, no matter how, depending on how you count it. And I know quite a lot of people in finance, in banking, in pharma, in life sciences. This Basel here is pharma town. There's Roche and Novartis are here. And I don't know anybody when they are like honest. That's also a part of David's definition. When you talk to the guy and you've had a few glasses of wine or a few beers and you say, what do you do? I'm a corporate lawyer. What's the function of your job? Well, nothing, Basically everybody knows somebody like that. Basically everybody has done something like that at some point in their lives. You can't go through large corporations without being confronted by that. I'm deeply persuaded by this. Through my own experience and through all the observations I made and people that I talked to over the years. And I think this is also one of the reasons why this essay didn't go viral once, but several times in different languages. You know, this does not look, even in the internet, doesn't happen very often. So I think it speaks to the lived experiences of so many people. Whether it's 10, 20, 50, 80%, that's a different discussion, but I think it's absolutely real.
Michael.
Yeah, so I had, I mean, I used to work as a temp in San Francisco when I was out in the Bay Area. And that was kind of great because the first day of the job is, and you had these jobs that people really didn't just care what you were doing. You were the temp or whatever. But, and there was one where they were just, I was employed and I was there. So they just said, okay, well, there was two different departments. They said, well, you go check with that department and see if they need you. And if they don't, come back here and I'll give you some work. And I could go, and the other department would say the same. And when I figured this out, I was like, well, so I just like told one department I was working with the one and the other department I was working with the other. And I went to the local food court and got on with doing work to apply for college, for university, so I could get into like doing applications to something else. But the really interesting job that I had was I worked in, this is a fascinating and really useful job useful to me, but it was like, I didn't really do anything productive in it. I had a job as a subcontractor for the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast. So these are shipyards famous for the purges in I think it's 1916, 1912, and they put all the Catholics out as part of the sectarian riots at the turn of the early part of the century. And the sort of shipyards were there, and they had kept going. There's the huge shipyards, and they had got a contract to build a ship. And in order to get this contract, because it's a declining industry, all the newest shipyards are like out in Korea, and they have these fancy technology. And this is like old technology. They couldn't really compete. So they went and figured out what the Koreans did. And the Koreans built the ship upside down so they could do the instrumentation in the roof automatically while it was on the floor. It was really faster. And then they had the technology to flip the ship upside down. And so the Belfast shipyards, in order to keep the jobs going, had gone out to Korea, figured out how they bid like that, and then bid below what they could build, even though they couldn't flip the ship, and just started building the ship. Half the ship was built on what do you call it? Like there's a metrics for it. One is jobs, so how many jobs you have and how are you completed it, and the other is how many as materials, how many materials. So they could never tell how much they had finished because they could measure how many materials and they could measure how many jobs they'd accomplished, but they could never tell because the two things were measuring them. They couldn't tell how much progress they were making when they added up. I got hired as a temp for 2 weeks as a maternity cover, and the guy, and they didn't, he told me, there's the material, familiarize yourself. I was just supposed to be the computer guy to help out the guy who's head of instrumentation electrical, who just sat in his desk, didn't seem to do too much, had phone calls occasionally, went off and whatnot. And I sat there and I was like, no idea what I did. And you don't ask questions in that type of mostly male environment. So I just studied it up, figured it out, tried to figure out what the instructions said. And he had given me a hard hat and says, if you want to do inspections. And I was like, what do you mean? Inspections of what? Like, you know, if you want to walk around and inspect things. So I basically had nothing to do. I was covering for someone else's job who was on maternity cover, and she needed her job. About week 2, he like asked me a question and said, hey, could you tell me this? And I had studied all things and I went rushing back, figured it out. I'd spent like 3 days figuring out what my job was supposed to be, but he didn't have any question. And so I answered the question and that was it. But it was a great job for me because I had just moved to Northern Ireland and I had to get on the dole because I had work. I could then claim the dole for the rest of the year. And I got to put on a hard hat, walk around the shipyards in Northern Ireland and take pictures of like sectarian graffiti, like up the prods and IUVF written on shipyards where they're building stuff. I was very, it was hilarious as a job, but it was, I don't know, would you call that a bullshit job? I had a great time, but it wasn't exactly what you would call super productive. It was keeping a bunch of people in jobs in Belfast for a while.
Can I jump in here? Because this discussion of the word job, actually, I think it was the first time it was brought up in this conversation. Is that correct? Anyways, I think the word jobs is really important. And I gave a lecture. I was invited I'm an artist, like that's my day job, which pays the bills, but it's not really like, it's just part of who I am. Like I have other interests beyond that. And I was invited to give a talk to a garden club and a senior club in a town nearby, like a town of really rich people. And the lecture I gave was like a talk. It was like 40 minutes long. And I was talking about the distinction between service jobs, and like how service jobs are 70% of the economy, but it's a misnomer because there's service jobs and then there's service jobs. Okay. And what I'm trying to get at is that like service jobs consist of things that you touch things or people, but like if you don't touch people, you're really just in service of capital. Like you're really like, so I think a better word for what we commonly in common parlance call service, a better word would be care. That's why we're calling the Museum of Care. Like it's not really service. Like we just picked the word service, but it's really care, because what we're really talking about is like, are you caring for capital? Are you caring for people? Are you caring for things? There's 3 types of care, like capital is people are people, and things are things. But, if it's not tangible, if you're not actually moving something or touching someone, then how can you possibly call it anything other than service of capital? And if we go back to jobs, right, like jobs consist of service jobs or industrial jobs. And then sometimes we say agriculture, but like what we mean by industry is kind of I think agriculture is like a tiny fraction of industry, but like industry kind of counts. But what I'm trying to get at is that, like, why does this matter? Because I think what this all comes from is this paradox of like how well-intentioned things lead to worse outcomes for everybody that's participating in this well-intentioned participation. Like we obviously like want there to be jobs, right? Like we do want there to be jobs, but in David Graeber's book, he never talks about this distinction of care jobs or service jobs and how we misclassify capital service as human service or people or service of things. And so that was the annoying thing about this book, is that like, why didn't Graeber just lay it out there so obviously that service jobs aren't all service? Like if you're in a hospital or an old person's home or a school, or touching something in a factory, like that's a different kind of service than if you're just part of the group of people, like, holding the puppet strings, let's call it. And so what I realized is that the other thing that we as a society worship is we worship artists. That's why we're calling it a museum. We worship art and artists. And this well-intentioned paradox is that we as well-intentioned people like value like the human creativity. Like we value museums and we value like artifacts of artists and real people that have invented things and discovered like creative ways to like represent important sentiments and that inspire like reflection and pondering in human beings. And so by this well-intentioned love of art, museums, we've kind of like lumped service jobs into capital service and then put those people in like, even though your job is like sitting at home on your couch with your dog and you're like drinking tea and like you don't have to touch anything, you don't have to breathe in like toxic fumes, you don't have to like clean up somebody's like off their body, you're not in the building with like little kids that are snobbling, like their noses are just dripping and it's getting all over you. That's a totally different kind of job than like a service job. Like some service is really just serving capital. And
Yeah, sorry,
so
maybe
I'll
I
just
can.
stop there. I'll just, you know, like
No,
that's kind of
yeah,
a good place to
Jared,
leave it off.
thank you
Yeah.
for mentioning the caring jobs. Actually, there is a David started to use this word care before it's become a buzzword. And actually, in this Sunday 19, we have a first seminar of care with Vienna Academy of Art. And David wrote a bunch of texts that we can share in this reading group. One of them is Revolt of the Caring Class. It's exactly probably what you mean. So kind of defining the this is different definition of bullshit jobs and the job of care. Exactly what you said, like people who taking care of the actual reproduction of the human life. And the bullshit jobs as a book become extremely famous, specifically during pandemic, when suddenly everybody realized that there is a jobs that could be, you know, skipped and a job that we really need.
Yeah, but if you skip the capital jobs, you skip like the heart of liberalism, which is free choice and will and like art and the books and the literature.
I wouldn't say like I think maybe we should let's Stephen moderate that. But I wouldn't
poetry,
put
though.
I wouldn't
Poetry
no,
has
I wouldn't
multiple
put
forms, you know. Most of
yeah,
it's
I wouldn't
metaphysical, but
just a second, Jared. No, I wouldn't put the like make an equal capital and culture, for example.
oh, okay, yeah, they're definitely
yeah.
they're not at
Yeah.
all. They're like in two different buildings. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
If I may say something, see, if you do art, if you do this of your own free will, this is not soul crushing. If you sit in an office, you have nothing to do, you write reports that nobody reads, that's soul crushing. I read somewhere that like in a gulag, for example, one of the things they did to punish the prisoners, to really make them suffer, is they would start to dig a hole in the morning. And then at lunch, they would be told to fill the hole up again. That's it. You do this every day. This is really, really destroying your mind. So all the things you just mentioned about care work, that per definition cannot be a bullshit job, because the person who does it is enjoying it. He sees the use and the value her work has. So these are not bullshit jobs. I would even argue that Michael's last example wouldn't actually count as a bullshit job because he was having way too much fun.
Yeah, I mean, but that might be me, but like, and it was also a temporary job. It's really easy to have fun in a temporary
If you had done it
job.
for 2 years, it might have been different, you know?
Yeah, well, and also I was looking after a job who somebody else might have been doing a lot of useful stuff, and I just had to be there to prove that she was needed.
Exactly, and many artist jobs are totally bullshit. When you know, like in Soviet Union, for example, it was the whole governmentally run corporation, social realism, in which many people were doing the bullshit jobs. I think Camila wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to share some examples. One is, I think I had a bullshit job just for a few weeks. I was covering for someone on paternity leave, but now I'm thinking that person doing that job permanently. It was for a Ministry of Education here at the provincial government, and it basically involves coming to the office, checking the emails, and if there was something that the central office, which is the ministry, sent to school boards, just forward it to them. That's it. That was all the job. It was pretty well paid for a new immigrant like myself. So I used the time in trying to make connections and trying to get a permanent job to move out from that 5 or 6 week job to a more permanent one in the same ministry, but in a different division. But I'm just thinking that I wouldn't be able to do that for too long. And it also reminded me of another example, and maybe Nika would second me. A lot of the government jobs back in like post-Soviet territory, you have to stay in the office until your boss leaves. So, and it's like reputational. The longer you stay in the office, that means the harder you're working. So they would all sit there until the minister has left. It could be midnight. They have nothing to do. They just play cards, like, you know, on online games and cards. But at the same time, there's so much like out externally, like I work for the ministry, there's so much pride in it. But because one of them was my cousins, I knew that they basically do nothing all day long. And then the thought of our like money paid in taxes going into salaries and electricity and rental for all these people to sit there and do nothing when we have so many problems that do need solution, but probably sitting there doesn't do it. Again, this idea that you have to be demonstrably busy. So of course the ministry building would have all the lights on. So if you're driving by, you would think, oh, they're working so hard. And so again, you couldn't leave until your boss has left. And even sometimes nowadays, I wouldn't say the jobs I've done here for different provincial and municipal governments is not 100% bullshit, but there are a lot of occasions where about 75% of the work that we produce goes into garbage bins, so to say. So if we're producing option papers, decision notes, a lot of the times the decision is already made. So all that you're making there is the fluff around it. It can be very frustrating. You're trying to give your best advice as a public servant, but it's all decided politically, but they need some kind of facade that analysis is done, that their options were considered, and it's not the case. So it can be very demoralizing.
Patricia?
Okay, gracias. So I recently went to a museum for Rosie the Riveter in Richmond, California. And, it was a celebration of women that had participated in the industry and pulled a fast, turnaround in ships. And it's always thought of these women that left their home to get a skill so that they can, work for the war. And that elevated the status of women, and they became, more and more engaged in society in a different way. Well, I saw the video and everything, and somewhere in the small print, it said 70% of these women already worked outside of their home. But we all know that 100% of them worked inside of their home doing service of care for their family members, and left that behind to start this army of folks that build ships for 4 days. I mean, like one ship would just, all these people would collectively work, and for 4 days they will build a ship. And it's just, I'm not sure how it fits, but I think that there is this pride that happens for industry. And I think of the pride of Brown's working in like AI right now, right? Where folks are like, oh, in the tech industry, and that we're building some future that's going to be very comfortable for everyone else, but and feel this trend, I don't know, it's like a trend labor, right? And I don't know if with Graeber's writing, he's not escaping that. I'm not sure how I can say this, but I think this applicable still, right? Like his book can apply for these trend positions that are created, and that people feel this like emotion, and that they really believe that what they're doing is really for the betterment of humanity. We all, I think, understand that war is not for the betterment of anyone, but for destruction. And so, I kind of thought of it like when I was in that museum, of how, again, I don't want to repeat myself, and how now all the young people are thinking, the best industry to go into is an industry that potentially can do a lot of harm. And so again, how does Graeber, I think Graeber addresses this in pieces of the book, just calling out and defining what a bullshit job is. But also, I wonder if in our collective thoughts, how can we produce some support to build conscience level around, these trends that, bring a lot of pride to people, right? So it's emotional, that you tell them, you kind of like pull the wool off their eyes. This is not going to be good, right? Don't go into that industry. So that was my, that's what I was thinking when you're all speaking. And I've had lots of bullshit jobs. Thank you.
Anyone else want to give a sense of their experience with a bullshit job? Quinn.
Yeah, I worked also as a temp in a law firm, and I remember getting stacks of papers that they wanted me to put onto a shelf. And then the next day they'd ask me to take the stacks off of the shelf, put them down on the ground, and then come back the next day and then put them back up on top of the shelf, you know? And this went on and on for an entire summer because they were just kind of trying to create something to do. And I was forbidden from knowing anything about the case that I was working on, you know, but working on. And at the end of the summer, they were all having a celebration. I was getting ready to go back to college, and they were all celebrating because they had won the case. And so I finally asked, like, can you tell me what this case was? And they said, oh, we're defending a shipping concern that was being sued by a bunch of indigenous people in Alaska. And we just basically won this lawsuit that means that we can basically fish their waters. And so not only was I working for this odious concern, the only joy that I got out of it was knowing that I didn't actually produce any value for them at all. So at the end of the day, my bullshit job was, I felt kind of lucky that I actually didn't actually do anything productive and was, you know, pretty high for most of the summer as well.
And I wanted to add that I think we say yes to bullshit jobs, but we wouldn't say yes to bullshit careers. And the reason I bring this up, just to add a little bit more context, maybe I should leave it here, but I did want to also just add a little bit more context. And the reason I bring this up is that I follow Claudia Golden, who's a labor award-winning. She just won the Nobel Prize award for her work in labor economics. And so that's kind of a familiar, she's from Harvard. She's one of the first PhD economists, or earliest, maybe not first, but pioneering Chicago, University of Chicago, and then Harvard. And it's sort of because Claudia Golden actually uses the euphemism career over jobs to talk about the nature of how some jobs are more capital service versus human care or care of things. And she just, you know, she did win the Nobel Prize. So, you know, maybe there's a possibility that there's a bullshit award, but because you can practice a job and actually be horrible at it and win awards. So maybe the Nobel Prize is a bullshit award, you know, like I think we have to consider that possibility if we're talking about bullshit jobs or bullshit careers, because we would never say bullshit careers. Like you would never, I don't care how bad somebody's art
I
is,
would say bullshit careers too. No, I would say bullshit career for sure. I would say most of careers are bullshit. And Chicago Economic School is, you know, not a good example to bring.
I think Barbara wanted to share something.
Yes, I worked, I have to print something from the screen and copy. Just typewriting what was on the internet, print it and copy, because they didn't know the concept of copy paste. And I worked in a call center, which is, you know, you just call to sell things. And then, yeah, as a waitress, I was terrible as well, with mixing up the tables. I couldn't remember where things went. But the thing is that I then realized that when I do many other jobs, it's just what do I feel? No, I feel less creative. I feel it's important to think what one, just to analyze. I mean, maybe different people feel different things, but I used to feel less creative. I used to have less self-esteem, and I wouldn't do things, just I wouldn't apply for a real job because everything was coming down to my psyche or soul or whatever, no? So I think it's important to look at the psychological aspect, because then you just you trap yourself. That's what I felt. And then when I was doing something different, just doing I paint, but they're terrible, and then I was feeling myself differently, maybe try to do something good for me. And I think that's a trap. And yeah, I mean, I'm not the one who's saying that, but I find this, yeah, I find this very important, because when we are in this trap, we just, yeah, outside, but we build as well the traps for ourselves, and kind of, and we should be aware of it. Yeah, something like that.
Thank you. I noticed that my lights just went off and I had to roll back to turn them back on, and it reminded me of a bullshit job that I once had. I worked at a corporate law firm. This is while I was working while I was in college, so it was just a job, nothing that I considered as a career. And my job was basically to turn the lights on and off for the attorneys who apparently were too important to be able to manage their own light fixtures. And so I would just sit in a room reading books of my own, reading whatever I wanted to. And when they would come in, it was my job to flick the lights on, flick them off when they left, just make sure that, we weren't, quote, wasting electricity. Silly bullshit job. I see that it's close to 4 o'clock. So we usually make these 1 hour long. So I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you everyone for coming. We'll meet again, I believe now I don't remember the date. I want to say December. I should know my schedule better, but it's the third Thursday. I think it's December 21st. So thank you, everyone. And next go around, we will look at chapter 2. If you want, bring some of your favorite quotes and ideas, because we get to make this group however we want it to be. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and I hope to see you again. Oh, Camilla, do you want to? Oh, that's an applause. Okay, I didn't know if you were putting up a hand. So thank you, everyone. It's nice meeting all of you, and what a wonderful group. I look forward to seeing you again in a couple weeks. Thank you.